Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be taking a close look at some really fascinating excerpts
Oh, yeah.
from Generations for Change. It's a free leader book,
Yeah.
and we also have some of the first few chapters of the full book, which is actually part of a trilogy. But we're going to be focusing just on these excerpts
Yeah.
for this deep dive. And we're going to be talking about some pretty complex stuff.
Right.
Like global interconnectedness and the often hidden cost of progress. And of course,
Of
we
course.
can't forget the big one, the climate crisis.
Yeah, it's a big one.
It is. But don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom.
Right.
The excerpts also offer a powerful message of hope. They really highlight the incredible potential for positive change through things like innovation and collective action.
Absolutely.
So are you ready to uncover some surprising facts?
Yeah.
And hear some inspiring stories?
Yeah.
And maybe even discover some practical steps that you can take to make a difference.
I'm ready.
Let's dive in.
These excerpts, they really emphasize how everything is connected. They use this really cool analogy of the butterfly effect. Have you heard of that?
I have. I love that analogy.
It's amazing. The idea that a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil could actually influence weather patterns across the globe.
It's mind-blowing.
It is. And the thing is, it's true.
Right.
Even small actions can have big consequences, especially in today's world where everything is so interconnected.
So how does this butterfly effect play out in real life? I mean, what are some concrete examples?
Well, the book uses a few compelling examples. Let's take the cobalt in your smartphone, for instance. It's probably mined in the Congo, and the process, it often comes at a high human and environmental cost.
Yeah, it's easy to forget about those costs when you're holding this sleek little device in your hand.
Right, exactly. Or consider cryptocurrency mining.
Okay.
It's a totally digital concept, but its energy consumption is massive.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that energy intensive.
Well, it's huge, and it's contributing to some serious issues, like, melting glaciers.
It's crazy to think that something as simple as a Google search uses the same energy as boiling a kettle.
It's wild, right?
It is. And we produce enough plastic waste each year to circle the Earth multiple times. It really makes you think about the impact of our everyday choices.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in. It's easy to forget that things we use every day, they have this whole complex journey behind them.
Right, and often with hidden consequences.
Exactly. But the excerpts also point to some really promising developments.
Oh, it's good to hear.
Yeah. Did you know that mangrove forests are incredibly efficient at storing carbon, even more so than terrestrial forests?
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
It's amazing. And urban planners are getting really creative. They're designing green cities, incorporating things like rooftop gardens, and prioritizing sustainable transportation.
That's encouraging.
Yeah.
It seems like there's this tension, this constant push and pull between the conveniences we enjoy and the hidden costs they carry.
Right.
It really makes you wonder, what are we really paying for progress? You know what I mean?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is.
And that's actually the central question that the book explores in the next chapter. It really pulls back the curtain on the true cost of our modern lifestyles.
Okay, give us an example.
Sure, they share this heartbreaking story about a young boy. His name is Kwame, and he lives in Ghana. And he burns copper wires from discarded electronics just to salvage valuable materials.
Oh, wow, that's heavy.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that progress for some often comes at the expense of others.
It's easy to forget that when you're, just clicking buy now on the latest gadget.
Right. It's out of sight, out of mind for a lot of us.
So are there other industries where we see similar hidden costs?
Absolutely. The fashion industry is another big one. The book talks about polluted rivers in Bangladesh filled with dyes from textile factories.
Oh, yeah, I've seen pictures. It's awful.
It is. And then there's the shrinking Aral Sea caused by water-intensive cotton farming.
It's hard to believe that something as simple as buying a T-shirt can contribute to these huge problems.
It's true, and we often don't even think about it.
It's sobering, for sure. So do you think being aware of these hidden costs would actually change people's purchasing decisions?
It's tough to say, but awareness is definitely the first step.
Right. You have to know there's a problem before you can even start to fix it.
Exactly. And the book also highlights something else that we often don't think about, the environmental impact of food waste.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Did you know that almost 40% of food goes uneaten in the U.S. alone?
Yeah.
And it all ends up in landfills contributing to methane emissions.
40%? That's crazy.
It is. And then there's the carbon footprint of our digital lives, like we were talking about earlier.
Right, with the cryptocurrency mining.
Yeah, even a single Google search uses a surprising amount of energy.
I know, it's mind-boggling when you think about how many searches are happening every second around the world.
Right. And when you multiply that, the impact is significant.
So what can we do about all of this? Are there any solutions out there that can actually make a difference?
One solution the book points to is this concept of a circular economy.
Okay, what's that?
It's where waste is minimized and resources are reused.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, it's a really cool idea. They mention Amsterdam's donut economics model as an example. It aims to meet the needs of everyone, but within the planet's ecological limits.
That sounds pretty ambitious.
It is. It's a fascinating approach. It really challenges the traditional growth at all costs economic model.
It does. It's like a whole different way of thinking about economics.
Right. It's a paradigm shift.
So are there any other examples of solutions in action, like real-world examples of this circular economy in practice?
Absolutely. They highlight companies like Fairphone.
Okay, I've heard of them.
They make modular smartphones that are designed to last longer and be easily repaired, so, less electronic waste.
That's a great idea.
Mm.
I mean, it makes so much sense to design things to be repaired instead of just thrown away.
Right. It's a much more sustainable approach.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, the reality of our impact, it can be pretty disheartening.
It can.
But seeing these glimpses of positive change, it definitely offers some hope.
It does. It's like a little light at the end of the tunnel.
Exactly.
What stands out to you the most so far from these excerpts?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
For me, it's the realization that even seemingly small choices like what we buy or how we dispose of things
Right.
can have a much larger impact than I ever considered.
I agree. It's kind of daunting when you first realize it.
It is, but it's also empowering.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Because it means that we actually have the power to make a difference.
Exactly, and that's what the book is really encouraging.
Okay.
A shift in perspective, where we recognize our interconnectedness and the power we have to influence the systems around us. And, that actually brings us to the next chapter, which tackles the climate crisis head on.
Okay, I'm ready for that.
Well-
Let's talk about the climate crisis.
All right. So the book starts by painting this vivid picture of a glacier melting in Alaska.
Oh, wow.
You can almost hear it groaning and cracking as huge chunks of ice break off and crash into the water.
I can just imagine it.
But then it moves beyond these familiar images to
Mhm.
explain some of the more complex dynamics at play, like feedback loops.
Feedback loops. I'm not sure I'm familiar with that term.
Okay, so imagine melting Arctic ice.
Okay.
As the ice melts, it exposes darker water,
Right.
which absorbs more heat from the sun,
Okay.
leading to even more ice melt. It's a vicious cycle. It just accelerates the warming process.
It's like a domino effect.
Yeah, exactly. And these feedback loops can also lead to tipping points where a system reaches a point of no return.
Like there's no going back.
Right. They highlight the Amazon rainforest as a prime example.
Okay.
As deforestation continues and temperatures rise, the rainforest is at risk of transitioning from a carbon sink to a carbon source, meaning it would release more carbon dioxide than it absorbs.
That's terrifying.
It is. It's a really scary thought.
Yeah.
And they also talk about the disruption of the jet stream.
Okay, how does that play into this?
Well, it leads to all sorts of extreme weather events around the world. We're seeing more prolonged floods, heat waves, and freezes.
We are.
And all of this has a huge impact on agriculture and global food security.
Right, because if the weather's unpredictable, it's hard to grow food.
Exactly. It's a huge problem. It's amazing how seemingly small changes in one part of the world can have such dramatic effects on weather patterns across the globe.
It is. It's like that butterfly effect we were talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
So what are they suggesting we do about all of this? Is there any hope of reversing these trends?
They highlight a range of solutions from large-scale initiatives like geoengineering and reforestation projects
Okay.
to the wisdom of indigenous practices that have long emphasized living in harmony with nature. For example, they mention Iceland's innovative carbon capture technology.
Like what's that?
It's actually pulling carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and storing it underground.
Wow, that sounds straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It does, doesn't it? But it's real and it's working.
That's incredible. Yeah. What about the impact of our food choices?
Mm.
I've heard a lot about the environmental impact of meat consumption. Do they touch on that at all?
They do. They point out that the carbon footprint of a hamburger is equivalent to driving a car for over 300 kilometers.
Wow, I had no idea it was that significant.
It's a lot. It's a powerful illustration of how our dietary choices contribute to the climate crisis. They also discuss the potential danger of thawing permafrost,
That's right.
which could release massive amounts of methane into the atmosphere, further accelerating warming.
It's a lot to take in. It can feel overwhelming to think about all of these interconnected issues.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But it's also motivating to know that there are people out there working on solutions.
It is, and it gives me hope that we can find a way through this.
I think we can too.
Yeah.
But it's important to acknowledge that the climate crisis doesn't affect everyone equally.
Right, that's a really crucial point. We need to talk about that.
Yeah.
It's so important to consider how the climate crisis intersects with these social and economic inequalities. It's not just an environmental issue.
Right. It's a matter of justice.
Exactly.
And that's a point that the book really drives home. They open this chapter with a story about a Kayapo village in the Amazon. It's been devastated by pollution and disease. Yeah. They're victims of a system that often prioritizes profit over people. It's heartbreaking, to see how those who have contributed the least to climate change are often the ones bearing the brunt of its consequences.
It's like a fundamental injustice almost.
It is. It's a huge injustice.
No.
They highlight how the wealthiest 1% emit more than double the carbon of the poorest half of the world combined. And this wealth disparity, it allows some to adapt to a changing climate, while others are left struggling to survive.
So they're basically saying that addressing inequality is a crucial part of tackling the climate crisis.
Absolutely. You can't solve one without addressing the other. And they share some pretty startling statistics. For example, climate change could push over 100 million people into extreme poverty by 2030.
Wow, that's a huge number.
It is. And they point out that economic inequality often drives environmental degradation. Communities that are struggling to survive may resort to things like deforestation or overfishing just out of necessity.
Right, because they don't have any other options.
Exactly. And it perpetuates this cycle of poverty and environmental damage.
It's a vicious cycle that needs to be broken. But I'm curious, do they offer any solutions that kind of address both climate change and inequality at the same time?
They do. They highlight the importance of empowering local communities to manage resources sustainably. For instance, community-managed forests in Brazil have shown lower deforestation rates than those under government or private control.
It makes sense that the people who live closest to the land and depend on it for their livelihoods would be the best stewards of its resources.
Right. It's like they have a vested interest in protecting it.
Exactly. What other examples do they give?
They talk about the just transition to renewable energy in South Africa, which aims to create jobs and uplift marginalized communities while moving away from fossil fuels.
So it's not just about switching to clean energy. It's about doing it in a way that's fair and equitable.
Exactly. It's about creating a more just and sustainable system for everyone.
These examples are incredibly inspiring. It feels like there's a real opportunity to address multiple problems at once by focusing on solutions that are rooted in equity and community empowerment.
I agree. It's about seeing the bigger picture and understanding how these issues are all interconnected.
But it also feels like a monumental task, to actually shift from these individual solutions to creating systemic change.
It is a big challenge, but the book emphasizes that it's not impossible. And that's where they introduce the concept of collective action, which they describe as our superpower.
Okay, I like that. Our superpower.
Yeah, it's a good way to think about it. And they start by reminding us of a historical success story, the Montreal Protocol, which phased out ozone-depleting substances through global cooperation.
Right. I remember learning about that in school. It was a huge accomplishment.
It was. It's proof that when we work together, we can overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges.
So it gives us hope that we can replicate that success with climate change.
Exactly. But, it's not just about global agreements. It's about translating that into action on the ground.
Right. So how do we do that? Do they offer any concrete examples?
They do. They highlight a variety of inspiring initiatives happening around the world. One example is Copenhagen's journey towards becoming carbon neutral.
I've heard about that. They're doing some really innovative things over there.
They are. It involves a collaborative effort between citizens, the government, and businesses. They've implemented a range of strategies from investing in renewable energy to promoting cycling and public transportation.
It's amazing to see a city taking such a holistic approach to sustainability. It's not just about one or two things. It's about transforming the entire system.
Exactly. And they also talk about the Standing Rock Sioux tribe's fight against the Dakota Access Pipeline.
Right. That was a really powerful movement.
It was. It drew global attention to indigenous rights and environmental justice. It's a great example of how a local movement can spark international solidarity and challenge powerful institutions.
It's incredible how a single act of resistance can have such a ripple effect.
It really can. It shows that even small actions actions can contribute to a larger movement for change.
So it's not just about big, grand gestures. It's about the everyday choices we make and the actions we take in our own communities.
Exactly. And they highlight the Green Belt movement in Kenya as another example.
Okay, tell me about that.
So it's this amazing movement where women have planted millions of trees and restored degraded landscapes.
Wow, that's incredible.
It is. And it's not just about environmental restoration. It's about empowering communities and addressing poverty.
It's amazing how interconnected these issues are and how solutions in one area can have positive ripple effects in others.
Right. Like a virtuous cycle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do they talk about the role of governments in fostering collective action?
They do. They touch on the importance of policies that support sustainability and investments that prioritize long-term well-being. For example, they mention Costa Rica's success story in transitioning to renewable energy.
Costa Rica is often held up as a model for sustainability. What's their secret?
Well, it's been driven by public consensus and a commitment to preserving biodiversity. It shows what can be accomplished when a nation prioritizes sustainability.
So it's not just about having the right technology or resources, it's about having the political will and the public support.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they emphasize the power of individual choices as well, like supporting businesses and organizations that align with our values, making conscious consumer decisions, and advocating for policies that promote sustainability.
So it's not just about what governments do, it's about what we do as individuals as well.
Right. We all have a role to play. They highlight the growing movement of people choosing to divest from fossil fuels and invest in renewable energy, for example.
So it's about putting our money where our mouth is, so to speak?
Exactly. It's about aligning our actions with our values. And they remind us that collective action isn't just about numbers, it's about a shared understanding of the systemic issues at play.
Right. It's about connecting the dots between environmental degradation, social injustice, and economic inequality.
Exactly. It's about seeing the bigger picture and recognizing that we're all part of a larger web of life. So if we're going to create a truly sustainable future, we need to address all of these issues in a holistic way.
It's about understanding that everything is connected and that our actions have consequences that ripple out far beyond ourselves.
Right, and that we have the power to make a difference both individually and collectively. And, that brings us to the next chapter, which focuses on the idea of a regenerative mindset and how we can shift from just trying to minimize harm to actively restoring and regenerating the planet.
I like that, a regenerative mindset. It sounds like a much more hopeful and empowering approach than just focusing on reducing our impact.
It is. It's about moving beyond the idea of just doing less bad and embracing the idea of doing more good.
Okay, so let's talk about those sparks of hope, those innovations. What are some of the things they highlight?
Well, they start by taking us to Morocco, to the Noor Solar Complex. It stretches across the desert, this massive sea of mirrors reflecting sunlight onto these towers that generate clean energy.
That sounds incredible. It's like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It is pretty futuristic. It's
Yeah.
a powerful image of what a renewable energy future could look like.
It really is.
Yeah.
So are there other examples of renewable energy innovations they discuss?
Yeah. They highlight breakthroughs in battery technology,
Okay.
which is crucial, for addressing the intermittency of solar and wind power.
Right. Because the sun isn't always shining and the wind isn't always blowing.
Exactly. So they mention this facility in Australia
Okay.
that houses the world's largest lithium-ion battery.
Wow, the world's largest.
Yeah. It's huge.
Yeah.
You can store enough energy to power a whole city.
That's amazing.
Mm.
It sounds like we're making real progress in overcoming some of the challenges associated with renewable energy.
We are. It's really encouraging.
So what about innovations in other areas like food production?
Yeah.
Curious to hear what they have to say about that.
Oh, they have some really cool examples of how technology is transforming agriculture. Like they talk about these solar-powered irrigation systems
Okay.
that are helping farmers in Kenya grow food even with really erratic rainfall.
That's so important, especially in a changing climate.
It is.
All
And they
right.
also talk about the rise of vertical farming.
Vertical farming. What's that?
So basically, it's where food is grown in vertically stacked layers, often in urban environments, and it uses significantly less water and land than traditional farming.
So you're saying we could have farms in skyscrapers?
It's possible. It's a really innovative way to produce food in a more sustainable way.
It sounds like something out of a science fiction novel.
It does, doesn't it? But it's becoming more and more common, and it has the potential to really revolutionize how we grow food.
That's exciting. What other innovations stood out to you?
They dedicate a whole section to regenerative agriculture,
Okay.
which focuses on restoring soil health and sequestering carbon.
So it's not just about growing food, it's about improving the land at the same time.
Exactly. It's a really holistic approach, and it's a quiet revolution that's happening on farms all around the world.
Like working with nature instead of against it.
Right, and it's so powerful.
I love that. What about innovations at the city level? Are there any examples of cities that are leading the way in sustainability?
Definitely. They highlight Burlington, Vermont, which has achieved 100% renewable energy.
Wow, 100%. That's incredible.
It is. They did it through a combination of solar, wind, hydroelectric, and biomass.
So they're not just relying on one source, they're diversifying.
Exactly. It's a great example of how we can transition to a clean energy future. It really is a testament to what can be achieved when a community comes together and prioritizes sustainability.
It gives you hope that a large-scale transition to renewable energy is actually possible.
I think it is. And, they also talk about the Netherlands, which
Great.
is really leading the way in embracing circular economy principles.
Yeah.
They're applying those principles to everything from textiles to construction materials, creating closed-loop systems where waste is minimized and resources are reused.
It's like they're creating a whole new economic model, one that's based on sustainability.
They are. It's really inspiring to see these different countries taking these bold steps, each one kind of leveraging their unique strengths and resources to create a more sustainable future.
It is. It feels like we're seeing a real paradigm shift happening,
Yeah.
where sustainability is being woven into the fabric of our societies, from how we produce energy to how we grow food to how we design our cities.
I agree. It's a really exciting time to be alive. But, it's important to remember that this transition won't be easy. There will be challenges and setbacks along the way.
Right. It's not going to happen overnight.
Exactly. But the good news is that we have the knowledge, the tools, and the collective will to make it happen. We just have to keep pushing forward.
That's where the role of individuals comes in, right?
Absolutely. They emphasize that while systemic change is crucial, individual actions still matter a lot.
So what can we do? What are some specific things that people can do in their own lives to be part of this transition?
Well, they recommend a lot of the things we've already talked about, like reducing our consumption and waste, choosing sustainable transportation options, supporting businesses that align with our values, and getting involved in our communities to advocate for change.
It sounds familiar. It reinforces the idea that all of these issues are interconnected and that the solutions often overlap.
Exactly. It's not about making isolated changes. It's about shifting our whole mindset, embracing a way of life that's in harmony with nature.
It's about remembering that we're part of something bigger than ourselves.
Right. And that our well-being is inextricably linked to the health of the planet.
So we need to take care of the planet if we want to take care of ourselves.
Exactly.
So to wrap things up, what are some key takeaways from Generations for Change?
Well, they remind us that we're not alone in this, that there's a growing movement of people all over the world who are working to create a better future.
That's a really powerful message.
It is. It gives me hope.
Me too. It's a reminder that we have the power to make a difference and that even small actions can have a ripple effect.
Exactly. And, they leave us with this really powerful quote from Wangari Maathai. She said, "The generation that destroys the environment is not the generation that pays the price. That is the problem."
It's a sobering thought, but it's also a call to action.
It is. It's a reminder that we need to act now for the sake of future generations.
So let's all do our part. Let's make choices that support a more sustainable and just world. Let's use our voices to advocate for change. And let's never give up hope that a better future is possible.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
That's it for this deep dive into Generations for Change. We hope you found it insightful and inspiring. And remember, the future is ours to create. Let's make it a good one.